Before I signed up with the National Park Service, I used to work as a trail guide for a company located out of Groveland, near eastern Yosemite. It was pretty great work, and honestly, most of my memories from those days are happy ones. But there's one job I remember not for the good reasons actually. It's the one that sticks with me for all the wrong reasons. One day, I was leading a group of young professionals up Half Dome as part of a team-building exercise. These trips were pretty typical, especially around the holidays. We'd take them up to Little Yosemite Valley, set up camp for the night around the campfire, and then the next morning we'd tackle Half Dome. The group that day for guys and 3 women seemed pretty normal. Some were more comfortable outdoors than others, but nobody really caught my attention as trouble. The next day, after we'd finished the climb and were heading back down from Half Dome, we paused for a breather. Suddenly, we heard a scream piercing through the trees. As the rest of us rested our legs and took a sip of water, 2 of the guys had gone ahead to snap some pictures of the valley view. Just a minute or two later, a horrible yelp rang out from the woods. Then, one of the men came running back, looking absolutely terrified. He told us his buddy was taking a picture near the edge of a cliff when he suddenly slipped and fell. I could tell by the look on his face that it was bad, but when I finally got closer, I saw the whole situation was much worse than I imagined. The guy had fallen onto a steep slope at the bottom of a cliff, not quite a straight drop, but enough tumbling to leave him in terrible shape. From what I could tell, he'd fallen roughly 200 feet down that slope. He wasn't moving, not making any noise. I told the group to stay back from the slope and gather where we just rested until I could get help. I needed to run ahead to find a gentler part of the slope to scramble down and give him some aid. It was crucial that everyone stayed safe and together so I could find them again after I went for help. Everyone agreed to stay put except for one tall guy who'd seen the fall. He insisted he wanted to help somehow. He looked fit enough and seemed capable of keeping up. So we took off jogging down the trail while I radioed HQ to send help. While we ran, the tall guy kept asking about the guy who fell, asking things like, "Do you think he's dead?" I told him I had no idea. Sometimes people survive crazy falls, even if they're badly hurt. That seemed to calm him a little, but not completely. I kept relaying our location as best I could to HQ. My boss had already spoken with the park rangers, who were sending out ATVs and a helicopter for a rescue. My goal was to describe our position clearly enough so the rescue team didn't just pass us by on their way in. The tall guy and I kept running until we found a gentle slope that we could safely descend. After reaching the bottom, we carefully made our way down without tripping ourselves up. When we arrived at the scene, what we saw was probably the most horrifying thing I'd witnessed on a jobber. Guy was riddled with multiple fractures, severe cuts on his face and head, and he was completely unconscious. But luckily, I checked his pulse and discovered he was still hanging on. I radioed HQ again and told my supervisor that he was still alive and miraculous, considering his injuries. That was the good news. The bad news was, he was badly injured and likely running out of time. My boss told me he'd informed the rangers. After giving him some basic first aid, all we could do was wait, hope that the ATVs or the helicopter spotted us in time. The tension in the air was thick and the taller guy kept asking, "Is he dead? Can you hear us?" and other nervous questions. He kept trying to talk to the injured man, saying, "You're gonna be okay, man, just hang in there." I wasn't sure if the guy could hear him, but I wasn't about to interrupt the effort to comfort him. Then the taller guy started saying things like, "He just tripped, man. Nothing I could have done." One second I was clicking pictures, and the next thing he's tumbling down that slope. I did my best to reassure him that accidents happen out in the wilderness, that it's part of nature's chaos. He echoed my words, but I noticed something strange in the way he said it. Like he wasn't trying to comfort the injured man anymore, it was like he was comforting himself. Then he added something that caught my attention. "It wasn't my fault." At first, I figured he was just trying to make himself feel better, but the way he said it gave me a weird feeling. like he was trying to convince himself, not the injured guy. I've seen a lot of horrible accidental attacks, accidental shootings, you name it, and every time, I'm always struck by how unselfish some people can be. They'll tear apart their shirts to make tourniquets, carry the injured for miles without a break, all for the sake of saving a life. It doesn't matter what they want or what's best for them anymore. What matters is the person who needs help right then and there. So, when this guy kept going on about how he slipped and it wasn't his fault, I thought, man, what a jerk. That's honestly all I was thinking. The tall guy seemed like some self-absorbed prick who didn't care about the situation. I didn't waste any more mental energy on it because I was fully focused on the horizon, listening and watching for any sign of help, either the ATV or the helicopter. He got more anxious and started panicking, asking me tons of stupid questions, so I told him to shut up and check the guy's pulse. It was weak but still there. I silently begged for some help to arrive soon. Then, after what felt like forever, I finally heard the distant roar of ATV engines coming our way. It was a sweet sound, like hope finally breaking through. We waved our arms, yelled, and jumped around to get their attention. When the rescue team saw us, they came fast, gearing up with a stretcher, advanced first aid supplies, GPS, and radios, so they could direct the helicopter exactly where to land. Watching those rangers at work was incredible. They kept their cool, even with injuries so bad that I couldn't look directly at them. As they carefully loaded the injured man onto the stretcher, we all heard the thunder of helicopter rotors approaching. It swooped in fast, and when it landed nearby, it felt like witnessing angels in action, truly heroic, risking their own safety just to save a few seconds, seconds that could mean the difference between life and death. The helicopter's blades spun while the crew hurried to secure the stretcher inside. Then, as the chopper lifted off, carrying him away, we saw the pilots perform some crazy maneuvers in the air, pitching and turning sharply, showing how much they risked. The chopper disappeared behind the mountain as the Rangers ran back over to us. We waited there until the sounds of the rotors faded into the distance. One Ranger asked where the rest of the group was, and I explained we'd been further up the trail. They gave me and the taller guy a ride back near the main trail, and from there, they helped us get down to the valley floor slowly but surely until we reached camp. Looking back now, I realize I should have picked up on something being off sooner. Everyone else seemed devastated, really shaken up, like they'd lost a friend. But the tall guy, he was almost distant. He didn't show any grief or pain, no sorrow, just walked around offering fake comfort, as if this tragedy was some kind of opportunity to show leadership. It was weird. And he kept spouting that stuff about how it wasn't his fault, that just witnessing the fall had messed him up. It seemed like he was trying to divert some of that sympathy onto himself, which didn't sit right with me. I remember thinking, okay, now this is strange, even though I understood that witnessing a fall like that is traumatizing. But something about his behavior wasn't adding up, something I'd overheard the night before, which I'll get to later. For now, I waited with the group at the campsite until their ride came. Then I headed back to headquarters and filled my boss in on everything. That's when I started to suspect, no, I knew deep down, that the guy hadn't slipped by accident. He'd been pushed, and I really believed it was the tall guy who did it. Sounds cruel, maybe, but I've seen enough rough stuff out there, and I knew a red flag when I saw one. My boss, a seasoned ex-ranger who'd seen it all, just laughed when I told him my theory. He joked about whether the tall guy had tried to finish off the injured guy when we got to the bottom. When I said no, actually helped me check his vitals, me boss joked. He doesn't seem like a stone-cold killer, does he? But that night, I'd overheard something that changed everything, a little snippet that I later repeated to the cops when they came. They showed up a few weeks later, asking questions. I didn't volunteer every detail up front. I knew they had their own questions. But I laid it all out, how the tall guy and the injured guide went off to talk in private that night, how they ignored my warning to come back to the fire, and how I eventually went looking for them. I described how I heard them arguing loud enough that I couldn't ignore it, and how I overheard one of them say, "Oh, is that it? You want me out of the way? Well, good luck, buddy." The second guy tried to sound reassuring, but I didn't catch what he said. I called them back to camp, and they said they'd return soon, but I could tell from their tone that something was off. I thought maybe it was just a business deal or something, but when the detectives looked at each other and stopped writing, I knew they suspected the same thing I did, that it might not be an accident after all. They told me the injured guy was in a coma, not expected to wake up anytime soon. That was a relief in a way, but also a terrible blow that he might not come out of it. They didn't ask me just about the fall. They wanted to know if I had noticed anything suspicious the night before. I gave them all I could remember. They said the guy in the woods, that poacher, was uncooperative and probably long gone by then. I helped fill out some forms, then called my boss to make sure he knew the cops were involved. It felt like a small victory, but I knew the truth, that the guy who pushed the injured guide was probably a dangerous criminal, maybe even a murderer. I didn't know how it all played out for the injured man, or if he ever woke up, but I've already made up my mind there was definitely an attempt on his life, and I was there for it. I got to see that monster try to slip away, but I was lucky to get out of there myself.